Angeles.
Now at 6, you're looking live at the U.S. Capitol tonight, where President Biden will deliver the State of the Union speech.
And it is no exaggeration to say this speech is one of the most important in his political career. And this as he fights to be reelected.
Well, over the next 2 hours, we will bring you President Biden's State of the Union speech, the Republican response, and in-depth analysis. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being with us tonight. I'm Susie Sa.
And I'm Chauncey Glover. We'll have full State of the Union coverage straight ahead. But first, we have breaking news, weather news here at home. We're talking about severe storms, rain, and hail. This is out of Van Nuys tonight.
Yeah, let's get straight to our Danny Roberti, who's tracking this severe weather. Wow, Danny.
I mean, this is wild, Susie and Chauncey. We have had these storms just ripping through Ventura, LA County into the Inland Empire, and you can still see that heavy rain out there. I mean, we had severe thunderstorm warnings earlier this afternoon and earlier this evening as well. This is where we were dealing with strong gusty winds. We were dealing with pea-sized hail, gusts up to about 50 miles per hour. Here's the storm that's bringing the heaviest rain right now in the Inland Empire. You can see areas of Moreno Valley kind of just getting hammered with this rain. We've got lots of lightning strikes moving through. A lot of these storms have been moving to the east. So let's track this one for you right now, where it's moving to. A lot of these storms have been making their way about 8, 9, 10 miles per hour next 26 minutes. Lakeview, Hot Springs, you are going to be in the path of this storm. So right now things are calm there, but we're going to start to see that heavy rain knocking on your rooftops. Also through a lot of our gateway cities, take a look at all that yellow out there. Areas from Inglewood into Compton over towards Lakewood, those yellows indicating that heavier rain that's moving through right now. That's widespread right there, and then also through areas of La Habra Heights. So we are going to continue to watch this for you as we go into this evening. Things are going to die down, but be prepared for things to be wet out there. We'll have more coverage coming up in just a bit.
And we're joined by KCAL News political reporter Tom Waite now.
And Tom Waite, it is hard to understate how important the night is for President Biden. I mean, especially on the heels of Super Tuesday, really solidifying his rematch with former President Donald Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everybody is watching this to see how he performs, right? Because a lot of people, politicians, pundits have said, you know, does he have the mental and physical fitness to go on to do another term? I mean, the same claims have been made about former President Trump as well. But obviously, President Biden is the president, and there have been a number of concerns, you know, from his own party about his health and his ability to continue on. He's very old, right? Sure. The oldest sitting president, I believe, at this point.
He started as the oldest president.
Right. And so at this point, that is something that people are going to be watching. How does he deliver this speech? He's in the building right now. We know he's there, getting ready to give his speech. We understand there's the main issues he really wants to hit on are, first of all, he wants to make the case that Bidenomics are working, that inflation is under control, wages are up. He's also going to talk a lot about abortion rights, IVF. That's been in the headlines, too, because Republican judges in Alabama tried to block IVF treatments. That was overturned by their legislature there, but that's another big issue. He's also going to talk about immigration, something that he's had issues with as well. But he's going to make the case that, hey, I was ready to sign a bipartisan border bill, immigration bill, but Republicans, at Trump's behest, blew up that bill to make sure that he could campaign on it. A very conservative immigration bill. And then, of course, the Israel-Hamas war. That'll be something he talks about as well. He's going to talk about how he wants to build a temporary port to deliver humanitarian aid.
And you talked about the president, his fitness, and what people will be holding on to tonight. They will be watching for the stumbles. They will be watching for the hesitations. In the LA Times today, there was an opinion piece there where they talked to a doctor who said, unfortunately, word hesitations coupled with mild stutter can't help but affect his public speaking because he already had that.
He does that. Yeah, exactly.
But Biden's political opponents and the uninformed exploit it, along with stereotypes about older people, to create a false narrative about intellectual impairment. So I know that will be big tonight as people listen to just how the president speaks.
Exactly. And, you know, this is the biggest audience he's probably going to have for many months leading up to the election. We don't know if there will be debates. Obviously, that would be a big audience there, too.
And the DNC in August.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, and we're also told that he's not going to necessarily mention former President Trump by name, but he will take jabs at him. Remember, former Former President Trump is facing 91 criminal charges. He's also on tape. There's an infamous phone call. He calls the top elections official in Georgia, asking him to find the exact number of votes that he lost by. So this is what President Biden and his strategists want to focus on. This is either me or that is the alternative, which is a man who is facing, dozens of criminal charges, who today just lost another ruling by a judge who said he has to pay $83 million to a woman he was found liable for raping or sexually assaulting, E. Jean Carroll, losing that today. He has a criminal case that begins in New York very soon, accused of using election finance money, campaign finance money to pay off a woman so that she wouldn't reveal that they had an affair before the 2016 election. So those are the kinds of things that President Biden, maybe not by name, but he will probably make reference to some of these issues.
Well, Tom, historically speaking, a president's political future has not been dependent on this speech. Yeah. It's not known to be a big political game changer. And now, historically, speeches have not led to a significant change in president's approval ratings either. Right now, approval ratings are very low for President Biden. Right now, we're talking, and on average, 38.1%, one of the lowest points of his presidency, in fact. This speech tonight, as we were highlighting earlier, it has great significance. I mean, coupled with the fact that it is, in fact, an election year, the president has really big tasks tonight.
That's absolutely right, Susie. And as we're looking live here, this is, of course, Senator Bernie Sanders there on your screen. Ran for president a couple times there.
Having a laugh.
That's right, having a laugh as he waits. Well, who knows what meme will come out of that, right? But yeah, you raise a really good point, Susie. Not just about that we're looking at the Supreme Court justices there. Supreme Court Justice John Roberts there, the head of the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice. But polls, not just his approval rating, but a lot of polls show either President Trump tied with Biden or leading him in many of the battleground states. So you're right. It's like the perception of the speech seems to matter more than in any other time.
Tom, we were talking about this. What is the one issue you think he must drive home tonight? We talked about how Democrats are putting reproductive rights front and center tonight. As we see members of the Democratic caucus, they're set to wear white along with pins that read "Fight for Reproductive Freedom." We talked about this. How important is it for him to drive this particular issue home tonight?
I think that is a key issue, Chauncey, because it is something that the majority of vast majority of Americans think that abortion should be legal. Also, IVF, that's another major issue that brings people from all kinds of parties all together. There's huge support for that. So, there are guests that will be in the audience. In fact, President Biden is bringing a woman from Texas who had a non-viable pregnancy, who was blocked from getting an abortion, even though her health could have been in jeopardy. The fetus was not viable. She had to leave the state to get care. He wants to showcase that. Like, how is this possible in 2024 that a woman can't get reproductive care in her own home state because of abortion restrictions? Now, on the other hand, we're going to have Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. His guests will be some of the relatives of family members of the fallen soldiers who were killed during the 2021 withdrawal of Afghanistan. He'll also have some activists who are against transgender athletes, and then he's also going to have, I believe, relatives of family members who were taken hostage by Hamas.
That's right. And the president inviting 17 relatives of Americans murdered or held captive by Hamas terrorists in Israel, as Tom was just alluding to. There are still 6 to 8 Americans still being held hostage. Right now, as we're looking at Doug Emhoff, the second gentleman, entering the chambers there, and will be a guest tonight in the box of First Lady Dr. Jill Biden. And along with him, former First Lady of California and advocate for women's health, Maria Shriver, will also be joining the First Lady tonight. As Tom mentioned, various guests joining the president's speech tonight, the First Lady as well, with some prominent congressional leaders inviting guests to personify issues or themes related to the speech. This is all by design, to have them there, to allude to them, to give reference to them when the president is talking about the issues.
And exactly, and those guests obviously designed to highlight certain issues, as you said, Susie and Chauncey. And another thing that President Biden really wants to highlight is, Look at the metrics of the economy when I took over. The economy was hemorrhaging jobs. The Republicans want the people to remember the Trump presidency before the pandemic, right? The economy was strong, the unemployment was low. But as President Trump left office, things were terrible in the economy. I mean, it was in free fall because of the pandemic. And of course, critics say that it was because President Trump didn't handle it correctly. Now, of course, there are people on both sides of that who say that that's not fair. It was out of his control. Now, here we go.
Dr. Joe Biden.
Yep. Dr. Joe Biden there. So, yeah, and so that's what the president wants to highlight, those metrics. Look at unemployment. Look at the stock market. Bidenomics is working. That's what he'll argue tonight.
He'll definitely tout jobs. Now, we were talking about this, that aisle seat. I've told
Yeah.
some of the congressmen and congresswomen, they get there. We're talking 6 to 8 hours before, so they can get that aisle seat.
That coveted spot.
That's
Yeah.
coveted
I had
spot.
never heard that before today.
Yeah, so they can shake the president's hand as he walks down the aisle.
Here's Speaker Mike Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, the President's Cabinet.
And, interestingly enough, speaking of the president's cabinet members, many of them, actually, at least a dozen of them, will be fanning out across the country to various swing states after this speech, where Biden won by small margins in 2020. For example, President Biden will be going to Wisconsin to talk about jobs. Vice President Harris will be going to Atlanta to talk about investments in clean energy. Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack will be at a farmers conference in Arizona to talk about economic opportunities there. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm will go to Nevada to announce a grant for a battery manufacturer. So lots happening right now within the campaign, and this is just one of those highlights of Joe Biden's campaign right now as he comes fresh off the primary.
Absolutely. And tonight we should mention that Alabama Senator Katie Britt, the youngest Republican woman elected to the U.S. Senate, is set to deliver the GOP's response. It's, of course, after President Biden delivers his speech.
And the only woman elected to the Alabama Senate.
Right. And you were talking about the IVF issue as that plays out in Alabama.
Yeah.
What do you think she has to nail in her speech? I think it will be, she will talk about that, but also she will possibly have to talk about how the president is unfit.
Exactly. I think what they're going to focus on is inflation. They are going to blame, they're going to pin inflation on the Democrats. They're going to claim that it's because of Joe Biden's policies that inflation is in the shape that it's in right now. Now, on the other side, the Democrats will argue, look, our inflation is a lot less severe than it is in other countries across the world. The pandemic is behind that. We've done all we can to stem it. And in fact, there's been a number of times when the interest rates have been raised, which is why inflation has come down. But it's still all you have to do is go to the grocery store or a restaurant right now, and it's very expensive. So Republicans are really going to try to focus on the economy and on immigration, even though they don't want you to know that it was a bipartisan bill on the table that the president was ready to sign, but they will still use that as a weapon against President Biden, because if you look at the numbers of the illegal crossings, and it is much higher under President Biden.
When do you think we'll see the most heckling, if we do tonight, from the Republicans? Do you think it'll be on reproductive rights when he starts to talk about that? Because there's been talks that he plans to reinstate Roe v. Wade.
Right, exactly. Last time, I don't know if our viewers remember, Marjorie Taylor Greene yelled liar at the president. So the question is, will Mike Johnson today, the Speaker of the House, did have a conversation with his caucus and said, hey, we should behave ourselves. Another one of the sort of Freedom Caucus members, Matt Gaetz, he also advised members to do that because the optics, he thinks, would be poor for the Republicans if you have people having these outbursts. But, it's already hard to tell. Marjorie Taylor Greene was interviewed on CNN earlier today, and she made no commitment either way as to whether or not she would, proceed with decorum. So we'll see if there are outbursts. But you're right, that's such a controversial issue, Chauncey. That could be a moment where there is one, or maybe they choose to focus on economic moments, because probably, I think that if you look, like Susie raised the point too, on a number of the polls, including his approval rating, that's where he's really hurting the most, is people believe that former President Trump was better on the economy than current President Biden, even though the metrics tell a different story if you look at where President Trump left in office, where things were and where things are now. But perception and reality don't always mix together.
It's true. And as we wait tonight for the Sergeant at Arms there to announce the president's arrival, and many of his guests arriving now, President Biden, Tom, a devout Catholic, he's had reservations about abortion in the past, as we were just talking about abortion. many analysts saying that that can't be the message tonight. He's got to take a side and make sure that he paints former President Trump right on the other side of it.
Exactly. I mean, President Trump is on, he has even said in one of his town halls, I am responsible for the overturning of Roe v. Wade. I think what you're going to see in the coming months, because President Biden has a massive war chest, far more cash on hand than President Trump, that they are going to flood the airwaves, they're going to flood social media with the messages about IVF, contraception, that's even coming up now too, and obviously abortion rights. I mean, these are things, this is what has won Democrats elections since the Roe versus Wade was overturned. That, like the midterms, there was a projected red wave that fizzled for the most part because of the abortion issue. And it's going to be on the ballot in a number of states in the general election. So that could help President Biden if the trends stay as they are.
Tom, how much of a campaign speech does this have to be for the president tonight, as he essentially must contrast himself with former President Donald Trump?
This, I think, is one of the biggest campaign speeches that he can possibly give, because he has definitely been mired in, the perception that he is not that health fit. And so he has to get up there and look authoritative. But as you pointed out, Chauncey, and then in that story in the LA Times, he has some built-in issues already, right? Like the stutter. So how will he come off to the American people tonight? This is a big audience. It's obviously a lot of networks. Obviously, media is different than it was before. It's much more splintered. All right.
Joe!
I thought we might have some,
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
And there it is, the Sergeant at Arms making the announcement of the president's arrival. And he's going to take some time here. He took many minutes, I can't remember how many, but several minutes last time, making his way down the aisle to shake hands and greet members of Congress on both sides of the aisle as he makes his way down the aisle, I should say.
And Susie, that is a long walk, and this is why I told you why some of them get there 6 to 8 hours so that they can get into these coveted places right there along the aisle so they can shake the president's hand.
Well, and this is funny too, just seeing some of some of his political opponents, and they appear so cordial and friendly as he makes his walk down this sort of gauntlet.
A lot of people say that the State of the Union speech is kind of an illustration of what it should look like.
Right.
Yeah,
how the parties should be working together and look like they are.
Indeed. And then you see Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer there right behind the president.
This is actually, interestingly enough, one of the latest dates a State of the Union speech has been given. The last time it was this late was actually by President Biden himself, and that was on March 2nd. Today will be March 7th. And before, usually traditionally it's been in American history being given January, February, those months.
And coinciding with our Super Tuesday week as well.
Right.
We had our
quite a week.
Big election. And that's, we've been talking about this, kind of goes without saying. I mean, we are looking like this is a setup for a rematch, obviously, between former President Trump and President Biden. This is something that a lot of the electorate didn't want to see from the polls we saw, but here we are, right? I mean, this is, after the Super Tuesday election, there's really no viable candidate. There is no candidate still in the race. Nikki Haley dropped out. President Biden didn't really have any strong competition, but Dean Phillips, the congressman who was running against him, he's dropped out as well. So what we have now, we have this setup for 2020 rematch. I don't know if I said 2024, but 2020 rematch. So there we have it.
A little bit of deja vu.
Right. And Tom, looking at some of the polls going into this as to what voters are wanting to hear, what's most important to them, we have to take a moment to talk about the issue there in Gaza and the humanitarian aid. What do you think the president is going to speak on when it comes to that? And do you think it's very important that that's also a key issue that he must drive home?
It absolutely is. And here's part of why. I mean, there's a core constituency. There's a big block of voters that matters to, in particular in Michigan, one of the absolutely critical states that he has to win. I worked in Detroit for 5 years at the TV station there. I can tell you, it's a very large Middle Eastern population and community that live in Michigan, and they are very unhappy with how President Biden has handled this Israel-Hamas war.
In Dearborn, and we saw
Absolutely,
that with all the uncommitted votes.
Yep,
That's
that was
right.
those protest votes.
Yeah.
Absolutely important to point that out. I think there was 20,000, I think, a significant chunk.
That's huge.
Well, it's unclear. Can he, at this point, do anything to repair that damage? We just don't know. We'll see if, how things look months from now. Of course, the general election is still very far away, right? It seems like in this media environment, too, while it seems really important tonight, I mean, in 2 weeks we could be talking about something else. It's really important, too. You know what I mean? It's just because there's so much that the cycle of news and information is just, it's a gushing all the time, right? So we'll see how that plays out. But I think the Israel-Hamas war, it's going to loom large over this election. And if this comes down to a really tight race, that could be on top of
The aisle selfie has also become
Always very popular,
important.
right?
That was Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee.
Yes, we were talking
Let me
about
tell
it before we went to air. Yeah.
we did a story on her in Texas about all of her selfies. She will have her cell phone there, and it's maybe a half a second you have to get that selfie with the president.
And now President Biden, this is interesting. He's talking to West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, who is not running for re-election. He's a Democrat. He's been kind of a thorn in the president's side. He even was considering running his own presidential campaign. He's since decided not to, but I don't think he's endorsed anyone yet, and people are kind of waiting to see what he does there. Also, his retirement could have big implications for the majority in the Senate. There's only a small, slim majority there in the Senate. I believe it's 52-48. The Democratic caucus there. It's very slim in any case. And his retirement, it's unclear if another Democrat can win that seat in West Virginia. I believe their popular Republican governor is currently running for it, and he has a very good chance of winning. And of course, the House of Representatives. I mean, the president's going to make an argument to voters, restore the majority for Democrats, because if you do, we can codify Roe versus Wade into law, federal protection for abortion rights.
4 House seats need to be flipped for that to happen.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's another big push she'll probably make during the speech.
Absolutely.
I love how the president just grabbing it.
He picks up the phone himself.
Well, let me do it myself.
I haven't
exactly.
seen this
He's
before.
into it.
He's like, I know how to do this.
But we talked about the fitness of the president,
Right.
and 2 times I've seen him kind of gesture like this, like
You're
strong
right.
man.
You're right.
And so I wonder if that is on the front of his mind as I have to show these people that I am strong.
Right.
I can only imagine it is.
You're right.
Yeah.
And even just taking the selfies
cell phone,
and
yeah.
kind of engage it, like, oh, look, I'm just,
And taking the phone from that.
Yeah. There's Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown. And obviously that's he appointed her to the Supreme Court. That was a very big moment in his early on in his presidency, or not super early on, but definitely, in the beginning stages there. And there he is talking with other members of the Supreme Court, Chief Justice John Roberts, Neil Gorsuch there as well. He was appointed, you might remember, to the seat left open by Justice Scalia, who died while President Obama was still in office. But at the time, Mitch McConnell, he was the Senate Majority Leader, would not allow a vote on Merrick Garland, who would have filled that seat had they approved it. And once President Trump won the election, he then appointed Neil Gorsuch to that seat. So that was a big moment in history, because there were 3 justices that President Trump appointed, all 3 of whom voted to overturn Roe versus Wade. And obviously that's where that leaves us today. And President Biden is going to argue that if you give President Trump back the White House, or even allow Republicans to control the Senate or the House, they will enact a federal abortion ban. Now, some Republicans have said they won't do that, but others have left that door open. So it is a very real possibility that if Republicans take the White House and regain majorities in the Senate, keep their majority in the House, that there could be a federal abortion ban. So we'll have to see.
The president taking his time, getting to the dais, speaking with various congressional members and guests. Some say tonight is the opportunity for the president to turn some numbers around, those low approval ratings that we've been talking about, a chance to make his case for his policies and, of course, his reelection or some say a chance for the president's weaknesses to be put under a microscope. And we've been talking about the age factor. You know, a lot of political analysts and strategists saying that the president can use that to his advantage, as he should.
Right.
That he should say, you know what, I've been here the longest, and I have been here, and I have been fighting, and I have been, as he makes his way to the dais here, we'll announce it just as soon as he begins speaking, but that he should use that to his advantage.
Absolutely. And he does have that experience. With age comes that experience, right? So something he might, definitely highlight, Susie. And there we have him speaking with the vice president there. And then, of course, next to her is the House Majority Leader. So this is, of course, the second House Majority Leader after Kevin McCarthy was ousted by the far right of his party. You know, we saw that play out. Kevin McCarthy left the House.
And here we go. President Joe Biden set to make his third State of the Union address tonight.
Thank you. Jill. Good evening. Good evening. If I were smart, I'd go home now. Mr. Speaker, Madam Vice President, members of Congress, my fellow Americans, in January 1941, Franklin Roosevelt came to this chamber to speak to the nation, and he said, I address you at a moment unprecedented in the history of the Union. Hitler was on the march. War was raging in Europe. President Roosevelt's purpose was to wake up Congress and alert the American people that this was no ordinary time. Freedom and democracy were under assault in the world. Tonight, I come to this same chamber to address the nation. Now, it's we who face an unprecedented moment in the history of the Union. And yes, my purpose tonight is to wake up the Congress and alert the American people that this is no ordinary moment either. Not since President Lincoln and the Civil War have freedom and democracy been under assault at home as they are today. What makes our moment rare is that freedom and democracy are under attack both at home and overseas at the very same time. Overseas, Putin of Russia is on the march, invading Ukraine and sowing chaos throughout Europe and beyond. If anybody in this room thinks Putin will stop at Ukraine, I assure you he will not. But Ukraine can stop Putin. Ukraine can stop Putin if we stand with Ukraine and provide the weapons that it needs to defend itself. That is all. That is all Ukraine is asking. They're not asking for American soldiers. In fact, there are no American soldiers at war in Ukraine, and I'm determined to keep it that way. But now, assistance to Ukraine is being blocked by those who want to walk away from our world leadership. It wasn't long ago when a Republican president named Ronald Reagan thundered, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Now, my predecessor, a former Republican president, tells Putin, quote, "Do whatever the hell you want." That's a quote. A former president actually said that, bowing down to a Russian leader. I think it's outrageous, it's dangerous, and it's unacceptable. is a founding member of NATO, the military alliance of democratic nations, created after World War II to prevent war and keep the peace. And today, we've made NATO stronger than ever. We welcomed Finland to the alliance last year. And just this morning, Sweden officially joined, and their minister is here tonight. We're going to stand up. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And they know how to fight. Mr. Prime Minister, welcome to NATO, the strongest military alliance the world has ever seen. I say this to Congress, we have to stand up to Putin. Send me a bipartisan national security bill. History is literally watching. History is watching. If the United States walks away, it will put Ukraine at risk. Europe is at risk. The free world will be at risk, emboldening others to do what they wish to do us harm. My message to President Putin, who I've known for a long time, is simple. We will not walk away. We will not bow down. I will not bow down. In a literal sense, history is watching. History is watching. Just like history watched 3 years ago on January 6th, when insurrectionists stormed this very Capitol and placed a dagger to the throat of American democracy. Many of you are here on that darkest of days. We all saw with our own eyes the insurrectionists were not patriots. They'd come to stop the peaceful transfer of power, to overturn the will of the people. January 6th lies about the 2020 election and the plots to steal the election posed a gravest threat to U.S. democracy since the Civil War. But they failed. America stood. America stood strong, and democracy prevailed. We must be honest. The threat to democracy must be defended. My predecessor and some of you here seek to bury the truth about January 6th. I will not do that. This is the moment to speak the truth and to bury the lies. Here's the simple truth. You can't love your country only when you win. As I've done ever since being elected to office, I ask all of you, without regard to party, to join together and defend democracy. Remember your oath of office of defending against all threats, foreign and domestic. Respect free and fair elections. Restore trust in our institutions. And make clear political violence has absolutely no place in America, zero place. Again, it's not hyperbole to suggest history is watching. We're watching. Your children and grandchildren will read about this day and what we do. History is watching another assault on freedom. Joining us tonight is Latoya Beasley, a social worker from Birmingham, Alabama. 14 months ago, she and her husband welcomed a baby girl thanks to the miracle of IVF. She scheduled treatments to have that second child. But the Alabama Supreme Court shut down IVF treatments across the state, unleashed by a Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade. She was told her dream would have to wait. What her family had got through should never have happened. Unless Congress acts, it could happen again. So tonight, let's stand up for families like hers. To my friends across the aisle, don't keep this waiting any longer. Guarantee the right to AVF. Guarantee it nationwide. Like most Americans, I believe Roe v. Wade got it right. I thank Vice President Harris for being an incredible leader, defending reproductive freedom, and so much more. Thank you. My predecessor came to office determined to see Roe v. Wade overturned. He's the reason it was overturned, and he brags about it. Look at the chaos that has resulted. Joining us tonight is Kate Cox, the wife and mother from Dallas. She's become pregnant again and had a fetus of a fatal condition. Her doctor told Kate that her own life and her ability to have children in the future were at risk if she didn't act. Because Texas law banned her ability to act, Kate and her husband had to leave the state to get what she needed. What her family got through should have never happened as well, but it's happening in too many others. There are state laws banning the freedom to choose, criminalizing doctors, forcing survivors of rape and incest to leave their states to get the treatment they need. Many of you in this chamber and my predecessor are promising to pass a national ban on reproductive freedom. My God, what freedom else would you take away? Look, it's a decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court majority wrote the following, and with all due respect, justices, women are not without electoral power. Electoral or political power. You're about to realize just how much you're right about that. Clearly, those bragging about overturning Roe v. Wade have no clue about the power of women. But they found out when reproductive freedom was on the ballot. We won in 2022 and 2020, and we'll win again in 2024. If you, the American people, send me a Congress that supports the right to choose, I promise you, I'll restore Roe v. Wade as the law of the land again. Folks, America cannot go back. I'm here tonight to show what I believe is the way forward, because I know how far we come. 4 years ago next week, before I came to office, the country was hit by the worst pandemic and the worst economic crisis in a century. Remember the fear, record losses? Remember the spikes in crime and the murder rate, raging virus that took more than 1 million American lives, of loved ones, millions left behind? A mental health crisis of isolation and loneliness. A president, my predecessor, failed the most basic presidential duty that he owes to American people, the duty to care. I think that's unforgivable. I came to office determined to get us through one of the toughest periods in the nation's history. We have. It doesn't make news in 1,000 cities and towns. The American people are writing the greatest comeback story never told. So let's tell the story here. Tell it here and now. America's comeback is building the future of American possibilities, building an economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down, investing in all America, in all Americans, to make sure everyone has a fair shot, and we leave no one behind. The pandemic no longer controls our lives. The vaccines that saved us from COVID are now being used to beat cancer, turning setback into comeback. That's what America does. That's what America does. Folks, my inherited economy is on the brink. Now our economy is literally the envy of the world. 15 million new jobs in just 3 years, a record, a record. at 50-year lows. A record 16 million Americans are starting small businesses, and each one is a literal act of hope. With historic job growth and small business growth for Black and Hispanics and Asian Americans, 800,000 new manufacturing jobs in America and counting. Where is it written we can't be the manufacturing capital of the world? We are, and we will. More people have health insurance today. More people have health insurance today than ever before. The racial wealth gap is as small as it's been in 20 years. Wages keep going up. Inflation keeps coming down. Inflation has dropped from 9% to 3%, the lowest in the world, and tending lower. The landing is and will be soft. And now, instead of importing foreign products and exporting American jobs, we're exporting American products and creating American jobs. Right here in America, where they belong. And it takes time, but the American people are beginning to feel it. Consumer studies show consumer confidence is soaring. Buy America has been the law of the land since the 1930s. Past administrations, including my predecessor, including some Democrats as well in the past, failed to buy American. Not anymore. On my watch, federal projects that you fund, like helping build American roads, bridges, and highways, will be made with American products and built by American workers. Creating good-paying American jobs. And thanks to our CHIPS and Science Act, the United States is investing more in research and development than ever before. During the pandemic, a shortage of semiconductors, chips, that drove up the price of everything from cell phones to automobiles. And by the way, we invented those chips right here in America. Well, instead of having to import them, private companies are now investing billions of dollars to build new chip factories here in America, creating tens of thousands of jobs. Many of those jobs paying $100,000 a year and don't require a college degree. In fact, my policies have attracted $650 billion in private sector investment in clean energy, advanced manufacturing, creating tens of thousands of jobs here in America. And thanks to our bipartisan infrastructure law, 46,000 new projects have been announced all across your communities. And by the way, I noticed some of you strongly voted against it, or they're cheering on that money coming in. I like it. I'm with you. I'm with you. And if any of you don't want that money in your district, just let me know. Modernize our roads and bridges, ports and airports, public transit systems. Removing poisonous lead pipes so every child can drink clean water without risk of brain damage. Providing affordable high-speed internet for every American, no matter where you live, urban, suburban, or rural communities, in red states and blue states. Record investments in tribal communities. Because of my investment in the family farm, because I invested in family farms led by my Secretary of Agriculture, who knows more about this than anybody I know, we're better able to stay in the family for those farms and their children and grandchildren won't have to leave home to make a living. It's transformative. The great comeback story is Belvedere, Illinois, home to an auto plant for nearly 60 years. Before I came to office, the plant was on its way to shutting down. Thousands of workers feared for their livelihoods. Hope was fading. Then I was elected to office, and we raised the Belvedere repeatedly with auto companies, knowing unions would make all the difference. The UAW worked like hell to keep the plant open and get these jobs back, and together we succeeded. Instead of auto factories shutting down, Auto factories reopening, a new state-of-the-art battery factory is being built to power those cars there at the same. The folks of Belvedere, I say, instead of your town being left behind, your community is moving forward again. Because instead of watching auto jobs of the future go overseas, 4,000 union jobs with higher wages are building the future in Belvedere right here in America. Here tonight is UAW President Shawn Fain, a great friend and a great labor leader. Shawn, where are you? Stand up. And Dawn Sims, a third-generation worker, UAW worker at Belvedere. Shawn, I was proud to be the first president to stand on the picket line, and today, Dawn has a good job in her hometown, providing stability for her family and pride and dignity as well. Showing once again, Wall Street didn't build America. They're not bad guys. They didn't build it, though. The middle class built the country, and unions built the middle class. I say to the American people, when America gets knocked down, we get back up. We keep going. That's America. That's you, the American people. It's because of you America's coming back. It's because of you our future is brighter. It's because of you that tonight we can proudly say the state of our union is strong and getting stronger. Tonight, I want to talk about the future of possibilities that we can build together. A future where the days of trickle-down economics are over and the wealthy and the biggest corporations no longer get all the tax breaks. And by the way, I understand corporations. I come from a state that has more corporations invested than every one of your states in the state of the United States combined. And I represented it for 36 years. I'm not anti-corporation, but I grew up in a home where trickle-down economics didn't put much on my dad's kitchen table. That's why I determined to turn things around so middle class does well. When they do well, the poor go way up and the wealthy still do very well. We all do well. And there's more to do to make sure you're feeling the benefits of all we're doing. Americans pay more for prescription drugs than anywhere in the world. It's wrong, and I'm ending it. With the law that I proposed and signed, not one of you Republican buddies voted for it. We finally beat Big Pharma. Instead of paying $400 a month or thereabouts for insulin with diabetes, and it only costs $10 to make, they only get paid $35 a month now and still make a healthy profit. And I want to, but what to do next? I want to cap the cost of insulin at $35 a month for every American who needs it. Everyone. For years, people have talked about it, but finally we got it done and gave Medicare the power to negotiate lower prices on prescription drugs, just like the VA is able to do for veterans. That's not just saving seniors money, it's saving taxpayers money. We cut the federal deficit by $160 billion. Because Medicare will no longer have to pay those exorbitant prices to Big Pharma. This year, Medicare is negotiating lower prices for some of the costliest drugs on the market. to treat everything from heart disease to arthritis. It's now time to go further and give Medicare the power to negotiate lower prices for 500 different drugs over the next decade. They're making a lot of money, guys. And they'll still be extremely profitable. Will not only save lives, it will save taxpayers another $200 billion. Starting next year, the same law caps total prescription drug costs for seniors on Medicare at $2,000 a year, even for expensive cancer drugs that cost $10,000, $12,000, $15,000. Now I want to cap prescription drug costs at $2,000 a year for everyone. Folks, I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, but if you want to get an Air Force One with me and fly to Toronto, Berlin, Moscow, well, even Moscow, probably. And bring your prescription with you, and I promise you I'll get it for you for 40% the cost you're paying now. Same company, same drug, same place. Folks, the Affordable Care Act, the old Obamacare, is still a very big deal. Over 100 million of you can no longer be denied health insurance because of pre-existing condition. Well, my predecessor and many in this chamber want to take this prescription drug away by repealing the Affordable Care Act. I'm not going to let that happen. We stopped you 50 times before and we'll stop you again. In fact, I'm not only protecting it, I'm expanding it. The enacted tax credits of $800 per person per year reduce health care costs for millions of working families. That tax credit expires next year. I want to make that savings permanent. To state the obvious, women are more than half our population. But research on women's health has always been underfunded. That's why we're launching the first ever White House initiative on women's health research, led by Jill, doing an incredible job as First Lady. We'll pass my plan for $12 billion to transfer women's health research and benefit millions of lives all across America. I know the cost of housing is so important to you. If inflation keeps coming down, mortgage rates will come down as well, and the Fed acknowledges that. But I'm not waiting. I want to provide an annual tax credit that will give Americans $400 a month for the next 2 years as mortgage rates come down, to put toward their mortgages when they buy their first home or trade up for a little more space. Just for 2 years. And my administration is also eliminating title insurance on federally backed mortgages. When you refinance your home, you can save $1,000 or more as a consequence. For millions of renters, we're cracking down on big landlords who use antitrust law, who break antitrust laws by price fixing and driving up rents. We've cut red tape so builders can get federally financing, which is already helping build a record 1.7 million new housing units nationwide. Now pass and build and renovate 2 million affordable homes and bring those rents down. To remain the strongest economy in the world, we need to have the best education system in the world. And I, like I suspect all of you, want to give a child, every child, a good start by providing access to preschool for 3 and 4 years old. You know, I think I pointed out last year that children coming from broken homes where there's no books, they're not read to, not spoken to very often, start school, kindergarten or first grade, having heard 1 million fewer words spoken. Well, studies show that children who go to preschool are nearly 50% more likely to finish high school, go on to earn a 2- and 4-year degree, no matter what their background is. I met a year and a half ago with the leaders of the Business Roundtable. They were mad that they were angry. I think, well, they were discussing why I wanted to spend money on education. I pointed out to them as vice president, I met with over 182 of those folks. Don't hold me to the exact number. And I asked them what they need most, the CEOs. And you've had the same experience on both sides of the aisle. They say a better educated workforce, right? So I looked at them, and I say, I come from Delaware. DuPont used to be the 8th largest corporation in the world. And every new enterprise they bought, they educated the workforce to that enterprise. But none of you do that anymore. Why are you angry with me providing you the opportunity for the best educated workforce in the world? And they all looked at me and said, I think you're right. I want to expand high-quality tutoring and summer learning to see that every child learns to read by 3rd grade. I'm also connecting local businesses and high schools so students get hands-on experience and a path to a good-paying job whether or not they go to college. And I want to make sure that college is more affordable. Let's continue increasing the Pell Grants to working and middle-class families and increase record investments in HBCUs and minority-serving institutions, including Hispanic institutions. And I was told I couldn't universally just change the way in which we dealt with student loans. I fixed 2 student loan programs that already existed to reduce the burden of student debt for nearly 4 million Americans, including nurses, firefighters, and others in public service. Like Keenan Jones, a public educator from Minnesota, who's here with us tonight. Keenan, where are you? Keenan, thank you. He's educated hundreds of students so they can go to college. Now he's able to help, after debt forgiveness, get his own daughter to college. And folks, look, such relief is good for the economy because folks are now able to buy a home, start a business, start a family. While we're at it, I want to give public school teachers a raise. And by the way, the first couple of years, we cut the deficit. Now, let me speak to the question of fundamental fairness for all Americans. I've been delivering real results in fiscally responsible ways. We've already cut the federal deficit. We've already cut the federal deficit over $1 trillion. I signed the bipartisan deal to cut another $1 trillion in the next decade. It's my goal to cut the federal deficit another $3 trillion by making big corporations and very wealthy finally beginning to pay their fair share. Look, I'm a capitalist. If you want to make or can make $1 million or millions of bucks, that's great. Just pay your fair share in taxes. A fair tax code is how we invest things to make this country great. Healthcare, education, defense, and so much more. But here's the deal. The last administration enacted a $2 trillion tax cut, overwhelmingly benefit the top 1%, the very wealthy and the biggest corporations, and exploded the federal deficit. They added more to the national debt than any presidential term in American history. Check the numbers. Folks at home, does anybody really think the tax code is fair? Do you really think the wealthy and big corporations need another $2 trillion tax break? I sure don't. I'm going to keep fighting like hell to make it fair. Under my plan, nobody earning less than $400,000 a year will pay an additional penny in federal taxes. Nobody, not one penny. And they haven't yet. In fact, the child tax credit I passed during the pandemic cut taxes for millions of working families and cut child poverty in half. Restore that child tax credit. No child should go hungry in this country. The way to make the tax code fair is to make big corporations and the very wealthy begin to pay their fair share. Remember in 2020, 55 of the biggest companies in America made $40 billion and paid zero in federal income tax. Zero. Not anymore. Thanks to the law I wrote and we signed, big companies have to pay a minimum of 15%. But that's still less than working people pay in federal taxes. It's time to raise corporate minimum tax to at least 21%. So every big corporation finally begins to pay their fair share. I also want to end tax breaks for big pharma, big oil, private jets, massive executive pay when it's only supposed to be $1 million that can be deducted. They can pay them $20 million if they want, but deduct $1 million. End it now. You know, there are 1,000 billionaires in America. You know what the average federal tax is for those billionaires? No. They're making great sacrifices, 8.2%. That's far less than the vast majority of Americans pay. No billionaire should pay a lower federal tax rate than a teacher, a sanitation worker, or a nurse. I propose a minimum tax for billionaires of 25%, just 25%. You know what that would raise? That would raise $500 billion over the next 10 years. And imagine what that could do for America. Imagine a future with affordable child care. Millions of families can get they need to go to work to help grow the economy. Imagine a future with paid leave, because no one should have to choose between working and taking care of their sick family member. Imagine the future of home care and elder care, and people living with disabilities so they can stay in their homes and family caregivers can finally get the pay they deserve. Tonight, let's all agree once again to stand up for seniors. Many of my friends on the other side of the aisle want to put Social Security on the chopping block. If anyone here tries to cut Social Security, Medicare, or raise the retirement age, I will stop you. The working people who built this country pay more into Social Security than millionaires and billionaires do. It's not fair. We have two ways to go. Republicans can cut Social Security and give more tax breaks to the wealthy. That's the proposal. Oh, no. You guys don't want another $2 trillion tax cut? I kind of thought that's what your plan was. Well, that's good to hear. You're not going to cut another $2 trillion for the super wealthy. That's good to hear. I'll protect and strengthen Social Security and make the wealthy pay their fair share. Look, too many corporations raise prices to pad their profits, charging more and more for less and less. That's why we're cracking down on corporations that engage in price gouging and deceptive pricing, from food to health care to housing. In fact, the snack companies think you won't notice if they change the size of the bag and put a hell of a lot fewer, same size bag, put fewer chips in it. No, I'm not joking. It's called shrinkflation. Pass Bobby Casey's bill and stop this. I really mean it. You probably all saw that commercial on Snickers bars. You get charged the same amount, and you got about, I don't know, 10% fewer Snickers in it. Look, I'm also getting rid of junk fees, those hidden fees at the end of your bill that are there without your knowledge. My administration announced we're cutting credit card late fees from $32 to $8. Banks and credit card companies are allowed to charge what it costs them to instigate the collection. And that's more, a hell of a lot, like $8 and 30-some dollars. They don't like it. The credit card companies don't like it. But I'm saving American families $20 billion a year with all the junk fees I'm eliminating. Folks at home, that's why the banks are so mad. It's $20 billion in profit. I'm not stopping there. My administration has proposed rules to make cable, travel, utilities, and online ticket sellers tell you the total price up front so there are no surprises. It matters. It matters. And so does this. In November, my team began serious negotiation with a bipartisan group of senators. The result was a bipartisan bill with the toughest set of border security reforms we've ever seen. Oh, you don't think so? Oh, you don't like that bill, huh? That conservatives got together and said it was a good bill? I'll be darned. That's amazing. That bipartisan bill would hire 1,500 more security agents and officers, 100 more immigration judges to help tackle the backload of 2 million cases, 4,300 more asylum officers, and new policies so they can resolve cases in 6 months instead of 6 years now. What are you against? 100 more high-tech drug detection machines to significantly increase the ability to screen and stop vehicles smuggling fentanyl into America. That's killing thousands of children. This bill would save lives and bring order to the border. It will also give me and any new president new emergency authority to temporarily shut down the border when the number of migrants at the border is overwhelming. The Border Patrol Union has endorsed this bill. The Federal Chamber of Commerce is, yeah. You're saying low. Look at the facts. I know you know how to read. I believe that given the opportunity for a majority in the House and Senate would endorse the bill as well, a majority right now. But unfortunately, politics has derailed this bill so far. I'm told my predecessor called members of Congress in the Senate to demand they block the bill. He feels political win. He viewed it as a political win for me and a political loser for him. It's not about him. It's not about me. I'd be a winner. Not really. Lincoln Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal. That's right. But how many of thousands of people being killed by illegals? To her parents, I say, my heart goes out to you, having lost children myself. I understand. But look, if we change the dynamic at the border, people pay these smugglers $8,000 to get across the border because they know if they get by, if they get by and let into the country, it's 6 to 8 years before they have a hearing. And it's worth taking the chance of the $8,000. But if it's only 6 months, 6 weeks, the idea is it's highly unlikely that people will pay that money and come all that way knowing that they'll be able to be kicked out quickly. Folks, I would respectfully suggest my Republican friends owe it to the American people, get this bill done. We need to act now. And if my predecessor is watching, instead of paying politics and pressuring members of Congress to block the bill, join me in telling the Congress to pass it. We can do it together. But that's what here's what he will not do. I will not demonize immigrants saying they are poison in the blood of our country. I will not separate families. I will not ban people because of their faith. Unlike my predecessor on my first day in office, I introduced a comprehensive bill to fix our immigration system. Take a look at it. It has all these and more. Secure the border. Provide a pathway to citizenship for dreamers. And so much more. But unlike my predecessor, I know who we are as Americans. We're the only nation in the world with a heart and soul that draws from old and new. Home to Native Americans and ancestors have been here for thousands of years. Home to people of from every place on earth. They came freely. Some came in chains. Some came when famine struck, like my ancestral family in Ireland. Some to flee persecution, to chase dreams that are impossible anywhere but here in America. That's America. And we all come from somewhere, but we're all Americans. Look, folks, we have a simple choice. We can fight about fixing the border, or we can fix it. I'm ready to fix it. Send me the border bill now. A transformational moment in history happened 59 years ago today in Selma, Alabama. Hundreds of foot soldiers for justice marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, named after the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan, to claim their fundamental right to vote. They were beaten, they were bloody, and left for dead. Our late friend and former colleague, John Lewis, was on that march. We miss him. Joining us tonight are other marchers, both in the gallery and on the floor, including Betty Mae Fikes, known as the voice of Selma. The daughter of gospel singers and preachers, she sang songs of prayer and protest on that bloody Sunday to help shake the nation's conscience. 5 months later, the Voting Rights Act passed and was signed into law. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But 59 years later, there are forces taking us back in time. Voter suppression, election subversion, unlimited dark money, extreme gerrymandering. John Lewis was a great friend to many of us here. But if you truly want to honor him and all the heroes who marched with him, then it's time to do more than talk. Pass the Freedom to Vote Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And stop Stop denying another core value of America, our diversity across American life. Banning books, it's wrong. Instead of erasing history, let's make history. I want to protect fundamental rights. Pass the Equality Act. And my message to transgender Americans, I have your back. Pass the PRO Act for workers' rights. Raise the federal minimum wage, because every worker has a right to a decent living more than $7 an hour. We're also making history by confronting the climate crisis, not denying it. I don't think any of you think there's no longer a climate crisis. At least I hope you don't. I'm taking the most significant action ever on climate in the history of the world. I'm cutting our carbon emissions in half by 2030, creating tens of thousands of clean energy jobs, like the IBEW workers building and installing 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations. Conserving 30% of America's lands and waters by 2030. And taking action on environmental justice, fence line communities smothered by the legacy of pollution. And pattern after the Peace Corps and AmeriCorps, I launched the Climate Corps to put 20,000 young people to work in the forefront of our clean energy future. I'll triple that number in a decade. To state the obvious, all Americans deserve the freedom to be safe. And America is safer today than when I took office. The year before I took office, murder rates went up 30%. 30% they went up. The biggest increase in history. It was then, through my American Rescue Plan, which every American voted against, I might add, we made the largest investment in public safety ever. Last year, the murder rate saw the sharpest decrease in history. Violent crime fell to one of its lowest levels in more than 50 years. But we have more to do. We have to help cities invest in more community police officers, more mental health workers, more community violence intervention. Give communities the tool to crack down on gun crime, retail crime, and carjacking. Keep building trust, as I've been doing by taking executive action on police reform and calling for it to be the law of the land. Directing my cabinet to review the federal classification of marijuana and expunging thousands of convictions for the mere possession, because no one should be jailed for simply using or have it on their record. Take on crimes of domestic violence. I'm ramping up the federal enforcement of the Violence Against Women Act that I proudly wrote when I was a senator, so we can finally end the scourge against women in America. There are other kinds of violence I want to stop. With us tonight is Jasmine, whose 9-year-old sister Jackie was murdered with 21 classmates and teachers in elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. Very soon after that happened, Jill and I went to Uvalde for a couple of days. We spent hours and hours with each of the families. We heard their message, so everyone in this room, in this chamber, could hear the same message. The constant refrain, and I was there for hours meeting with every family. They said, do something. Do something. Well, I did do something by establishing the first ever Office of Gun Violence Prevention in the White House, that the Vice President is leading the charge. Thank you for doing it. Meanwhile, my predecessor told the NRA he's proud he did nothing on guns when he was president. Oh. After another shooting in Iowa recently, he said, when asked what to do about it, he said, just get over it. There's his quote, just get over it. I say, stop it. Stop it, stop it, stop it. I'm proud we beat the NRA when I signed the most significant gun safety law in nearly 30 years because of this Congress. We now must beat the NRA again. I'm demanding a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Pass universal background checks. None of this. None of this. I taught the Second Amendment for 12 years. None of this violates the Second Amendment or vilifies responsible gun owners. You know, as we manage challenges at home, we're also managing crises abroad, including in the Middle East. I know the last 5 months have been gut-wrenching for so many people, for the Israeli people, for the Palestinian people, and so many here in America. This crisis began on October 7th with a massacre by a terrorist group called Hamas, as you all know. 1,200 innocent people, women and girls, men and boys, slaughtered after enduring sexual violence. The deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust, and 250 hostages taken. Here in this chamber tonight are families whose loved ones are still being held by Hamas. I pledge to all the families that we will not rest until we bring every one of your loved ones home. We also we will also work around the clock to bring home Evan and Paul, Americans being unjustly detained by the Russians and others around the world. Israel has the right to go after Hamas. Hamas ended this conflict by releasing hostages, laying down arms, could end it by releasing the hostages, laying down arms, and surrendering those responsible for October 7th. But Israel has Israel has an added burden because Hamas hides and operates among the civilian population like cowards, under hospitals, daycare centers, and all the like. Israel also has a fundamental responsibility, though, to protect innocent civilians in Gaza. This war has taken a greater toll on innocent civilians than all previous wars in Gaza combined. More than 30,000 Palestinians have been killed, most of whom are not Hamas. Thousands and thousands of innocent women and children, girls and boys, also orphaned. Nearly 2 million more Palestinians under bombardment or displacement. Homes destroyed, neighborhoods in rubble, cities in ruin. Families without food, water, medicine. It's heartbreaking. I've been working nonstop to establish an immediate ceasefire that would last for 6 weeks to get all the prisoners released, all the hostages released. To get the hostages home and ease the intolerable and humanitarian crisis and build toward an enduring, something more enduring. The United States has been leading international efforts to get more humanitarian assistance to Gaza. Tonight, I'm directing the U.S. military to lead an emergency mission to establish a temporary pier in the Mediterranean on the coast of Gaza that can receive large shipments carrying food, water, medicine, and temporary shelters. No U.S. boots will be on the ground. A temporary pier will enable a massive increase in the amount of humanitarian assistance getting into Gaza every day. And Israel must do its part. Israel must allow more aid into Gaza to ensure humanitarian workers aren't caught in the crossfire. And they're announcing they're going to have a crossing in northern Gaza. To the leadership of Israel, I say this: humanitarian assistance cannot be a secondary consideration or a bargaining chip. Protecting and saving innocent lives has to be a priority. As we look to the future, the only real solution to the situation is a two-state solution over time. And I say this, As a lifelong supporter of Israel, my entire career, no one has a stronger record with Israel than I do. I challenge any of you here. I'm the only American president to visit Israel in wartime. But there is no other path that guarantees Israel's security and democracy. There is no other path that guarantees that Palestinians can live in peace with peace and dignity. And there's no other path that guarantees peace between Israel and all of its neighbors, including Saudi Arabia, with whom I'm talking. Creating stability in the Middle East also means containing the threat posed by Iran. That's why I built a coalition of more than a dozen countries to defend international shipping and freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. I've ordered strikes to degrade the Houthi capability and defend U.S. forces in the region. As Commander-in-Chief, I will not hesitate to direct further measures to protect our people and our military personnel. For years, I've heard many of my Republican and Democratic friends say that China is on the rise and America is falling behind. They've got it backwards. I've been saying it for over 4 years, even when I wasn't president. America's rising. We have the best economy in the world. And since I've come to office, our GDP is up, our trade deficit with China is down to the lowest point in over a decade. And we're standing up against China's unfair economic practices. We're standing up for peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits. I've revitalized our partnership and alliance in the Pacific. India, Australia, Japan, South Korea, Pacific Islands. I've made sure that the most advanced American technologies can't be used in China, not allowing to trade them there. Frankly, for all this tough talk on China, it never occurred to my predecessor to do any of that. I want competition with China, not conflict. And we're in a stronger position to win the conflict of the 21st century against China than anyone else, for that matter, than any time as well. Here at home, I've signed over 400 bipartisan bills. But there's more to pass my unity agenda. Strengthen penalties on fentanyl trafficking. You don't want to do that, huh? Pass bipartisan privacy legislation to protect our children online. Harness the promise of AI to protect us from peril. Ban AI voice impersonations and more. And keep our truly sacred obligation to train and equip those we send into harm's way and care for them and their families when they come home and when they don't. That's why the song Support and Help of Dennis and the VA, I signed the PACT Act. One of the most significant laws ever, helping millions of veterans exposed to toxins who now are battling more than 100 different cancers. Many of them don't come home, but we owe them and their families support. We owe it to ourselves to keep supporting our new health research agency called ARPA-H, and remind us that we can do big things like end cancer as we know it, and we will. Let me close with this. Yay. I know you don't want to hear any more, Lindsay, but I got to say a few more things. I know it may not look like it, but I've been around a while. When you get to be my age, certain things become clearer than ever. I know the American story. Again and again, I've seen the contest between competing forces in the battle for the soul of our nation. Between those who want to pull America back to the past and those who want to move America into the future. My lifetime has taught me to embrace freedom and democracy, a future based on core values that have defined America: honesty, decency, dignity, equality, to respect everyone, to give everyone a fair shot, to give hate no safe harbor. Now, other people my age see it differently. The American story of resentment, revenge, and retribution, that's not me. I was born amid World War II when America stood for the freedom of the world. I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claymont, Delaware, among working-class people who built this country. I watched in horror as two of my heroes, like many of you did, Dr. King and Bobby Kennedy, were assassinated. And their legacies inspired me to pursue a career in service. I left the law firm, became a public defender because my city of Wilmington was the only city in America occupied by the National Guard after Dr. King was assassinated because of the riots. And I became a county councilman almost by accident. I got elected to the United States Senate when I had no intention of running at age 29. Then vice president of our first black president. Now president to the first women vice president. In my career, I've been told I was too young. By the way, they're going to let me on the Senate elevators for votes sometimes. They're not a joke. And I've been told I'm too old. Whether young or old, I've always known what endures. I've known our North Star. The very idea of America is that we're all created equal and deserves to be treated equally throughout our lives. We've never fully lived up to that idea, but we've never walked away from it either. And I won't walk away from it now. I'm optimistic. I really am. I'm optimistic, Nancy. My fellow Americans, the issue facing our nation isn't how old we are. It's how old are our ideas. Hate, anger, revenge, retribution are the oldest of ideas. But you can't lead America with ancient ideas. It'll only take us back. You lead America, the land of possibilities. You need a vision for the future and what can and should be done. Tonight you've heard mine. I see a future where defending democracy, you don't diminish it. I see a future where we restore the right to choose and protect our freedoms, not take them away. I see a future where the middle class finally has a fair shot and the wealthy have to pay their fair share in taxes. I see a future where we save the planet from the climate crisis and our country from gun violence. Above all, I see a future for all Americans. I see a country for all Americans. And I will always be president for all Americans because I believe in America. I believe in you, the American people. You're the reason we've never been more optimistic about our future than I am now. So let's build the future together. Let's remember who we are. We are the United States of America. And there is nothing beyond our capacity when we act together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
The 46th President of the United States, President Joe Biden, giving his third State of the Union, and he says states of our union is strong and getting stronger. He touched on many, many issues. He opened with a push to stand with Ukraine, a push for a bipartisan bill, saying we will not walk away, we will not bow down. His message to Russian President Vladimir Putin. He guaranteed the right to IVF nationwide, and standing ovation from both sides received on that issue. And his messages to the justices tonight: women are not without electoral or political power. The justices with zero reaction when he talked about that. The president talking about many women's issues and highlighting the fact that women have the right to do various things. And it was really interesting to see, though, too, as well, because it was a tradition that started in 2019, Democratic Women of Congress wearing white again as a way to show unity and a commitment to defending women's rights. And that was certainly apparent in the chamber tonight.
And Susie, this was a bit of a non-traditional State of the Union address. What so many people expected, this was a big campaign speech. He got right to it, right out of the gate, talking about the top issues on his agenda, starting with Ukraine, democracy, reproductive rights, also the threat of what he called his predecessor. He never said Donald Trump's name. Also starting by taking us back to January 1941, Franklin D. Roosevelt, in saying we sort of mirrored himself, saying, I come here as that time now. This is no ordinary time. We want to bring in our expert, Zeb. Talk about how do you think the president did tonight in this address?
Well, it didn't lack for energy, did it? Anybody who's been complaining about him being not energetic enough, I thought this is one of his most energetic speeches ever. I thought you said it at the beginning. He came out of the starter's gate hard, and he made it very clear this is going to be a political speech. This is the beginning of the political, the general election for the presidency. He struck a comparison between his policies and the former president's policies over and over again. So he started off with Putin and basically saying either you're with me or you're with Putin. And Putin is not very popular in this country, believe it or not. And then he went from there on a laundry list of things that he has done and a laundry list of things he wants to do. So I thought on the whole, he started about a half an hour late. He raced through that speech, but I thought it was what he wanted to do. He wanted to stake out the trail ahead, and I think he did it.
And just a reminder for our viewers now, as we watch the president after his State of the Union speech, joining us live here on set is our political analyst, Zev Yaroslavsky, longtime LA and city county leader, as well as with the UCLA Luskin School of Public Affairs now. Zev, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
It's a pleasure.
You know, President Biden, he had some damaging issues, if you will, coming into the speech tonight. One of them being, of course, just the various issues of immigration, ceasefire in Gaza. Do you think that the president was able to touch on these issues and offer some sort of relief or answer, resolution to these big issues for Americans tonight? As we always talk about, Zev, the State of the Union speech doesn't have much of an effect on policymaking.
Yeah, look, the State of the Union speech is an opportunity, one of the only opportunities the president has to have this audience, this big an audience, and have command the attention of the American people. And so what you say here has legs. Look, we are a polarized society, in case anybody hasn't noticed, and Biden is a consensus builder, and those two don't mesh very well. So you could even hear it when he's talking about the Israel-Gaza crisis. Repeated his position, which is well known and well loved in Israel and many other places, but his support for their right to defend themselves. But on the other hand, he also called out the need for humanitarian aid and the humanitarian crisis that has taken place in Gaza. No matter which side of this battle you're on, it's a mess.
Yeah, he's been trying to broker this deal, the second deal, and it's been difficult.
Well, and I think there's politics in that too. I think there's some people who are in this game right now and around the negotiating table who prefer not to have an end to this thing. Maybe they get a better deal down the line. They think he's too desperate or he's not desperate enough. I think he's trying to walk a fine line. And the one thing that nobody else in this country has is the responsibility that the President of the United States has. He's the only person who has to make these tough decisions. I remember once asking Vice President Gore what's it like to be vice president? He said, nothing like it is to be president, because the only decisions that get to the president are the ones that nobody below him can solve. Think about that for a second. So he's got every decision that gets to him is the one that nobody else could solve. And Gaza, Israel is one of those crises right now.
And Zev, you talked about the president starting at about 30 minutes late. According to some of the reports out of D.C. tonight, protests against his support for Israel's war on Hamas blocked a possible route for the president's motorcade on the way to the address. Those are some of the reports coming out of D.C. tonight. So that might have sort of stalled a little.
So that's why the speech started a half an hour late. Okay, now I know who to blame.
Possibly so. Those are some of the reports coming out of D.C. tonight. But, you know, when we talk about, you talked about the legs and, you know, and what he has to say tonight. Another big topic that we talked about was him talking about Roe versus Wade. And when he talked straight to the justices, saying respectfully. And how do you think that landed? We know that was a big issue going into tonight. How do you think his wording, and how do you think he landed that? I'm trying to find the...
I know the line you're referring to.
Yes.
I thought it was one of the best lines of the speech, addressing the Supreme Court justices.
Yes.
In their opinion, they said that women have electoral and political power. And then he added, you're about to find out how right you were.
That's it.
And I think most women, and I would like to think most men, understand the stakes on that issue. The right of a woman to control her own body should be not only a constitutional right, but a moral right. I know not everybody agrees with that, but I've been around long enough to know that the alternative is not pleasant. And he had a couple of people in the audience who have had to go through tragic circumstances just to be able to have a baby, or just to be able to save their lives. This is not a one-off. This goes on all the time in all 50 states of the union. So I think it landed well, and I thought that was a great line.
And you're talking about the young lady from Dallas, Texas, who had to sue the state, and then also the young lady in Alabama who was denied the right to IVF. And he went very hard on this, even starting by saying Roe v. Wade got it right. And he says, promise to restore Roe v. Wade as the law of the land again.
Yeah, he's been saying that over and over again, and but he didn't have the audience. He doesn't always have the audience that he has tonight. And so he hit all the points that, and every president does this, Republican presidents do this too. You use this podium to hit all the things that play to your strength, and I would like to think that most presidents also talk to the strength of the national interest. I thought, I thought he showed a lot of energy, he covered a lot of territory, and I just think that all of this talk about he doesn't have enough energy, the last line he had, one of the last lines, he says for most of his life, they complained about him being too young because he was elected to the Senate when he was 29. And now they complain he's too old. The fact is, most of the people, almost every person who I know who has been in a room with him, say that his arthritic back is bothering him, his bad ankle is bothering him, but his mind is all there.
Well, New York Times poll, Zev, shows that 61% of those who voted for Biden in 2020 now say he's too old to lead effectively. Many analysts said tonight the best way for the president to deal with the age factor was to say, hey, this is my experience, to brag about that and to tout that part of things. Do you think he did that and did that effectively? And
remind you, we are talking about an 81-year-old president.
Yeah. So I work with a guy who's 98 years old. I won't mention his name, but if he's watching, he probably knows what I'm talking about, who is still running a big company. So it's not the age, it's not the numeral that's in front of your age, it's what your capacity is. Look, he's had issues with speaking all of his life. Sure. He was a stutterer when he was a young boy. That never leaves you. It gets suppressed and then it comes back. A lot of that is part of that. It's his wisdom, it's his mind, it's his judgment. There's an old Mark Twain line that good judgment is the product of experience, and experience is often the product of bad judgment. So he's been around a long time. He knows what works and what doesn't work. I'm not here to pump him up. I'm supposed to be objective. But I would say this, if we're talking about an 82-year-old Republican who also had his mind was all there. I may not agree with the policies, but I don't think anybody who knows him has questioned. It doesn't look good to people who don't know him, but the people who do know him know that his mind is all there. And look at his record, for God's sake, for the last 3 years, 3.25 years. Look at what he's had to deal with. Not everything is within his control, and even so, he's taken us out of an post-pandemic. We had a hyperinflation. Everybody said we're going to have a recession. We haven't had a recession. It's been a soft landing. I mean, all the boxes have been checked. It's just that it hasn't resonated with the public yet. But there's 8 months to go, 7.5 months to go until the election, and a lot can change between now and then.
Well,
and then there's foreign
that.
policy.
Let's talk about that for a second. We have, however months you said left to go until November. And between now and then, obviously, we have debates, the conventions coming up in the summer. So a lot of time between now and then, Zev. But do you think that between now and then, I mean, tonight's speech, do you think it did sway anyone one way or another? We say that the State of the Union speech does not do that. But was tonight a unique time that maybe it did?
Well, no, I don't think you can tell now. It's the cumulative effect of everything that's going to go on, including tonight, and what happens tomorrow, and what happens in the Middle East or in Russia or Ukraine in the ensuing months. It's all the cumulative impact. No one thing is going to change this. But the one thing that has more impact than any other thing, other than unexpected events, that over which he has control, is a State of the Union speech. Every president has that opportunity to command this kind of an audience and to lay out his policies, his aspirations, his accomplishments and his aspirations. And it was really important that he not just talk about what happened yesterday, but what he wants to do tomorrow. And that's always been a successful tact for every president.
And we were talking about this. This was a very, very loaded speech. President Biden got a lot of information in. And when we talk about where we are today, did it point out just how challenged our nation is in this moment?
Yeah, I think, when he started his speech by saying on January, whatever it is, 1941, I'm a history buff. And I look back at dates like that and I say, I wonder what it was like. The world seems to be coming apart at the seams these days. You've got wars going on all over the place. You've got terrorism. You've got democracy in retreat in many parts of the world. You kind of get the feeling, I use this, that it's July 1914, the month before World War I got set off. The pressure on the president and the pressure on other world leaders right now, it's not the planned things that we worry about. It's the unexpected things. It's something that unexpected that triggers something. And they didn't have nuclear weapons in 1914. We do. There's 6 or 7 nations that have nuclear weapons now. So the stakes are very high for the world. The stakes are very high for the United States. And would I like to have a 45-year-old guy who can run a sub-4-minute mile in the White House? Maybe, but he probably wouldn't have the judgment and the wisdom and the experience that he has.
Zev, of course, one of the other biggest issues for Biden, some were called the most damaging, it was so interesting to see how he would touch on the border crisis and immigration. During Biden's 3 years in office, more people have crossed the border than ever. And it's hard to hide that. What he did use, though, were one of the strategies tonight was using guests in the audience to invite guests to symbolize some of this various aspects of this theme, like a Border Patrol agent, an immigrant rights activist, a DACA program recipients. This is something that obviously the House is stuck on right now. Do you think whatever the president said tonight helped Americans think, okay, we've got this?
Again, I think we'll have to see how this is retained by the American people in the days ahead, and they process all that they heard. There was a lot they heard tonight. Look, the border issue is a major issue, and it's another one of these cases where polarization doesn't help it. And it doesn't help that the former president of the United States is trying to torpedo any progress on border legislation because he thinks it'll make Biden look good and make it harder for him to get elected. There's no secret about that. The president was right. Trump has made calls to legislators in Congress. Don't vote for this thing. Let it simmer. That's not a way. That's not acting in the national interest. If you have a problem, you solve it. You don't wait till the next election because it might help you get elected. That's not a sustainable policy strategy.
But do you think President Biden did lay out a clear plan for that? You know, he talked about the bipartisan bill being tanked, and he did get aggressive during that. That was also the one time we did hear a little heckling from Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene out of Georgia, who yelled out, "Say her name," which was talking about a young lady who was allegedly murdered by someone who crossed the border. But this is when he got a little aggressive and said, quote, "I know you know how to read," but do you think he laid out a clear plan for people who were criticizing him about this?
I'm not sure. You know, it depends which side of the argument you're on, and you know the problem with polarization is we tend only to listen to the people we agree with, and not listen to the people who have a different point of view. I think that's one of the great tragedies of our society now. It's a tragedy in academia. You only teach what you agree with. You only learn what you agree with, and you only listen to the network that you agree with. I mean, it's just one of those things, and that's not good for democracy. And there's now a debate about what is true, right? Remember the phrase "alternative facts." At some point, you got to trust people who are in your institutions and who are your researchers and who are your doctors and your whoever. And the bottom line is that one of the great dangers that we have is that our institutions have now lost the public confidence, not just the politicians, but the institutions themselves. And that's not a good situation. So I don't know about the border, whether he got that across. He was interrupted at that point. He was speaking very fast at that point, and so I'm not sure how much of that got across. But we do know one thing. There was a bipartisan border legislation between the Republicans and the Democrats in the Senate and the White House. And it got sent over to the House, and they're killing it. And it was everything they asked for, you know, arguably everything the Republicans had asked for. But they didn't want to approve it because it would make Biden look good. It would help his reelection possibilities. And now they blame him for the border crisis. And he's got there's plenty of blame to go around. He owns some of it. Trump owns some of it. Previous presidents own some of it. But bottom line is there was a solution on the table, and it was torpedoed for political reasons with a capital P, not policy reasons and not the national interest.
I want to go back to the issue of abortion. President Biden has had his reservations about the issue as a devout Catholic himself. But many analysts saying that he couldn't put that message out tonight. Do you think he sort of played to the other side well? To position himself in such a way?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's entitled to his personal beliefs. He's entitled to his personal religious beliefs. Where you get into trouble is when your personal beliefs start to bleed into public policy. We do have at least for the time being, we still have a separation of church and state in this country. And he's respected that. And I have to respect him. I haven't heard him speak to it lately, but I know there was a comment he made. I didn't hear it personally about this. I had a state senator once who was absolutely against abortion, but he never used his power to stop abortion bills from going through the state legislature. I mean, so you have to respect people who have religious values, as long as they don't impose those values on everybody else.
All right. Well, we are just seconds away from the Republican response to President Biden's address tonight that is set to be given by Senator Katie Britt out of Alabama. Let's listen in.
And I have the honor of serving the people of the great state of Alabama and the United States Senate. However, that's not the job that matters most. I am a proud wife and mom of 2 school-aged kids. My daughter Bennett and my son Ridgway are why I ran for the Senate. I'm worried about their future and the future of children in every corner of our nation. And that's why I invited you into our home tonight. Like so many families across America, my husband Wesley and I just watched President Biden's State of the Union address from our living room. And what we saw was the performance of a permanent politician who has actually been in office for longer than I've been alive. One thing was quite clear, though. President Biden just doesn't get it. He's out of touch. Under his administration, families are worse off, our communities are less safe, and our country is less secure. I just wish he understood what real families are facing around kitchen tables just like this one. You know, this is where our family has tough conversations. It's where we make hard decisions. It's where we share the good, the bad, and the ugly of our days. It's where we laugh together. And it's where we hold each other's hands and pray for God's guidance. And many nights, to be honest, it's where Wesley and I worry. I know we're not alone. And so tonight, the American family needs to have a tough conversation. Because the truth is, we're all worried about the future of our nation. The country we know and love seems to be slipping away, and it feels like the next generation will have fewer opportunities and less freedoms than we did. I worry my own children may not even get a shot at living their American dreams. My American dream allowed me, the daughter of two small business owners from rural Enterprise, Alabama, to be elected to the United States Senate at the age of 40. Growing up, sweeping the floor at my dad's hardware store and cleaning the bathroom at my mom's dance studio, I never could have imagined what my story would entail. To think about what the American dream can do across just one generation, in just one lifetime, it's truly breathtaking. But right now, the American dream has turned into a nightmare for so many families. The true, unvarnished state of our union begins and ends with this. Our families are hurting. Our country can do better. And you don't have to look any further than the crisis at our southern border to see it. President Biden inherited the most secure border of all time. But minutes after taking office, he suspended all deportations, he halted construction of the border wall, and he announced a plan to give amnesty to millions. We know that President Biden didn't just create this border crisis, he invited it with 94 executive actions in his first 100 days. When I took office, I took a different approach. I traveled to the Del Rio sector of Texas. That's where I spoke to a woman who shared her story with me. She had been sex trafficked by the cartels starting at the age of 12. She told me not just that she was raped every day, but how many times a day she was raped. The cartels put her on a mattress in a shoebox of a room, and they sent men through that door over and over again for hours and hours on end. We wouldn't be okay with this happening in a third world country. This is the United States of America, and it is past time, in my opinion, that we start acting like it. President Biden's border policies are a disgrace. This crisis is despicable. And the truth is, it is almost entirely preventable. From fentanyl poisonings to horrific murders There are empty chairs tonight at kitchen tables just like this one because of President Biden's senseless border policies. Just think about Laken Riley. In my neighboring state of Georgia, this beautiful 22-year-old nursing student went out on a jog one morning, but she never got the opportunity to return home. She was brutally murdered by one of the millions of illegal border crossers President Biden chose to release into our homeland. Y'all, as a mom, I can't quit thinking about this. I mean, this could have been my daughter. This could have been yours. And tonight, President Biden finally said her name. But he refused to take responsibility for his own actions. Mr. President, enough is enough. Innocent Americans are dying, and you only have yourself to blame. Fulfill your oath of office. Reverse your policies. End this crisis and stop the suffering. Sadly, we know that President Biden's failures don't stop there. His reckless spending dug our economy into a hole and sent the cost of living through the roof. We have the worst inflation in 40 years and the highest credit card debt in our nation's history. Let that sink in. Hardworking families are struggling to make ends meet today. And with soaring mortgage rates and sky-high childcare costs, they're also struggling to how to plan for tomorrow. The American people are scraping by, while President Biden proudly proclaims that Bidenomics is working. Goodness, y'all, bless his heart, we know better. I'll never forget stopping at a gas station in Chilton County one evening. The gentleman working the counter told me that after retiring, he had to pick up a job in his 70s so that he didn't have to choose between going hungry or going without his medication. He said, I did everything right. I did everything I was told to do. I worked hard, I saved, I was responsible. He's not alone. I hear similar concerns from fellow parents, whether I am walking with my friends or whether I'm at my kids' games. But let's be honest, it's been a minute since Joe Biden pumped gas, ran a carpool, or even pushed a grocery cart. Meanwhile, the rest of us see our dollar and we know it doesn't go as far. We see it every day. And despite what he tells you, our communities are not safer. For years, the left has coddled criminals and defunded the police, all while letting repeat offenders walk free. The result is tragic, but foreseeable. From our small towns to America's most iconic city streets, life is getting more and more dangerous. And unfortunately, President Biden's weakness isn't just hurting families here at home. He is making us a punchline on the world stage. Look, where I'm from, your word is your bond. But for 3 years, the president has demonstrated that America's word doesn't mean what it used to. From abandoning our allies in his disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan to desperately pushing another dangerous deal with Iran, President Biden has failed. We've become a nation in retreat, and the enemies of freedom, they see an opportunity. Putin's brutal aggression in Europe has put our allies on the brink. Iran's terrorist proxies have slaughtered Israeli, Jews, and American citizens. They've targeted commercial shipping, and they've attacked our troops nearly 200 times since October, killing 3 U.S. soldiers and 2 Navy SEALs. Meanwhile, the Chinese Communist Party is undercutting America's workers. China is buying up our farmland, spying on our military installations, and spreading propaganda through the likes of TikTok. You see, the CCP knows that if it conquers the minds of our next generation, it conquers America. And what does President Biden do? Well, he bans TikTok for government employees, but creates an account for his own campaign. Y'all, you can't make this stuff up. Look, we all recall when presidents faced national security threats with strength and resolve. That seems like ancient history. Right now, our commander-in-chief is not in command. The free world deserves better than a dithering and diminished leader. America deserves leaders who recognize that secure borders, stable prices, safe streets, and a strong defense are actually the cornerstones of a great nation. Just ask yourself, are you better off now than you were 3 years ago? There's no doubt we're at a crossroads, and it doesn't have to be this way. We all feel it. But here's the good news. We, the people, are still in the driver's seat. We get to decide whether our future will grow brighter or whether we'll settle for an America in decline. Well, I know which choice our children deserve, and I know the choice the Republican Party is fighting for. We are the party of hard-working parents and families, and we want to give you and your children the opportunities to thrive. And we want families to grow. It's why we strongly support continued nationwide access to in vitro fertilization. We want to help loving moms and dads bring precious life into this world. Wesley and I believe there is no greater blessing in life than our children. And that's why tonight, I want to make a direct appeal to the parents out there, and in particular to my fellow moms, many of whom I know will be up tossing and turning at 2 a.m., wondering how you're going to be in 3 places at once and then somehow still get dinner on the table. First of all, we see you, we hear you, and we stand with you. I know you're frustrated. I know you're probably disgusted by most of what you see going on in Washington, and I'll be really honest with you, you're not wrong for feeling that way. Look, I get it. The task in front of us isn't an easy one, but I can promise you one thing. It is worth it. So I am asking you, for the sake of your kids and your grandkids, get into the arena. Every generation has been called to do hard things. American greatness rests in the fact that we always answer that call. It's who we are. Never forget, we are steeped in the blood of patriots who overthrew the most powerful empire in the world. We walk in the footsteps of pioneers who tamed the wild. We now carry forward the same flame of freedom as the liberators of an oppressed Europe. We continue to draw courage from those who bent the moral arc of the universe. And when we gaze upon the heavens, never forget that our DNA contains the same ingenuity that put man on the moon. America has been tested before, and every single time we've emerged unbowed and unbroken. Our history has been written with the grit of men and women who got knocked down. But we know their stories because they did not stay down. We are here because they stood back up. So now it's our turn, our moment to stand up and prove ourselves worthy of protecting the American dream. Together, we can reawaken the heroic spirit of a great nation. Because America, we don't just have a rendezvous with destiny. We take destiny's hand and we lead it. Our future starts around kitchen tables just like this, with moms and dads just like you. And you are why I believe with every fiber of my being that despite the current state of our union, our best days are still ahead. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless these United States of America.
All right, the Republican response tonight from Senator Katie Britt from Alabama, who happens to be the youngest woman to be elected to the Senate. We're going to have a full wrap of the President's State of the Union speech, as well as the Republican response, and more tonight along KCAL News at 8. And KCAL News at 8 starts right now. Now at 8, SoCal drying off tonight after another weekend, or evening rather, of wicked weather.
And thunderstorms, lightning, even a river of hail caught on camera. Look at this. This was out of Van Nuys. Danny.
Hi, Chauncey. It was a wild afternoon and evening here in Southern California. Things are quieting down. We're going to take a look at who's still seeing some of that rain and where we've seen hail. That's coming up next.
And breaking news tonight, the CHP in pursuit of a pickup truck trying to run people off the road in the San Fernando Valley.
And a high-stakes State of the Union tonight for President Biden as he makes his case for another term.
And I'm assignment editor Mike Rogers at the desk. Scary moments today for folks on board a United flight when the tire falls off. Where it landed and what happened next. Ahead.
This is KCAL News, Los Angeles.